So I just got back from presenting at a conference and I want to reflect on that and give you 5 ways that I have found make presenting at conferences a little easier. So to start, as I've mentioned many times in this podcast, I experience a lot of anxiety and nothing makes me more anxious than having to present at a conference in front of a lot of people, or at least it did. And I've got myself much better prepared and better able to present in front of large groups. I would say the number one thing that creates anxiety for me, though, is not knowing how many people I'm going to work with. That often is a great way to help me plan. If I know I've got 12 people versus 20 people versus 6 people, I can scale my activities and plan more appropriately. But since I don't know how many people are going to be in attendance, I have to figure out some strategies that are going to help me. So I'm going to go through these 5. So the first is a piece of advice I was given from, or really, I'm not sure he ever gave it to me. I just observed it from Chris Ortiz. And he is a fantastic presenter. And if you've ever gone to a conference where his name is on the agenda and gone to a workshop, you'll know that he's a great presenter at conferences. One of the things I noticed him doing, and sometimes if I see a good presenter, I try to pay attention to what's happening. What are they doing? And one of the things he does really well is at the start of the workshop, right? Well, in the minutes leading up to the start, he will arrive early. He'll set some stuff up, but then he'll start walking around the circle, if there's a circle of chairs around the outside, or if there's chairs in a row, but he'll go and sit with people and just start talking to them rather than standing awkwardly and waiting for the clock to tick down until the start time. He would talk to them. Now, there's a friend, colleague, an industry professional called Mark Collard. He's based out of Australia, and he has a phrase that he uses called the unofficial start. Now, I'm going to go into some of that in later on. Some of the reasons I disagree with running activities before the activities, but as an unofficial start, for me, it's going and sitting with people who are attending. So there's that awkward tension as people are walking in, they're taking seats. I just go and join them. One time I did this and I found it quite humorous, but I sat there and pretended I wasn't the presenter and was just chatting with them and saying, like, yeah, I hope this person's good. And have you ever done any workshops like this before? And what have been your takeaways so far during the conference? What worked, what didn't? And you start to gauge, like, oh, this is what people are thinking and this is how they're coming into the space. And then I had a lavalier microphone and I just turned it on, then stayed seated and ran the start from a seated position around the group instead of being the sage on the stage. I was quite literally the guide on the side. And so I was sitting there, and it was kind of enjoyable to actually do the start of a workshop, the intros, the awkwardness sometimes, and just do it seated with the group. And so I've started doing that more often. I just sit with the attendees. So at the conference I was just at, which is the Massachusetts Physical Educator Conference. It's shortened for MAPHED, I think it's called. And I had probably like 100 plus people in the room, and it was a very overwhelming number of people. And so I decided to sit with some people at the start, and it really helped me relax to the point where I could then look at the watch and say, okay, it's time to go. And then I got up and started speaking. So I have found that really helpful. And it's a nerve-wracking experience to go and sit with a stranger and engage them in conversation. But my opening question has been, how has the conference been for you so far? That tends to be a good opening, and then people start talking from there. So that's tip number 1. And I wrote, sit and chat with attendees. Tip number 2 is back to that activity thing. The thing that creates anxiety for me is not knowing how many people. So I'm very intentional about creating an agenda in a workshop for conferences with activities that scale. And if activities don't scale very well, meaning you can't go up high or low, then I tend not to do them. I've seen workshops where the presenter has said, this works great for 10 people. So if I could have 10 people, everybody else you can watch from the outside. I struggle with that, if I'm honest, that flow, that way that works. I'm not great at being able to feel comfortable working with a small group and having lots of people stare at me. I really like the engagement of people during activities. So, as much as I possibly can, I try to pick activities that I could do with 6 and then I could do with 100. And I actually think they're the more beneficial for the people in the workshop coming because they see the scalability of an activity. Because I don't know how many people everyone's going to be working with. And if I've only done an activity that works with 10 or 12, then I don't consider that that helpful in scalability. So choose activities that scale. The next one is focus on those that choose to participate. Now, the reason I put this in is because if you have ever presented at physical education conferences, you will know, and apologies to those physical educators who are listening, but you already know this to be the case because if you've attended conferences, you know, they are the hardest ones to get actual participation in. I will share at some point on my Instagram a video of the last workshop that I led, which shows how many people are sitting around the outside and how many actually stood up to participate. And those numbers are very different. And I get super overwhelmed by that because I don't know who I'm supposed to be presenting to. Like, there's 70 people sitting and only 30 people actually standing in the circle. And for the first part, I had a lav, a microphone, and I was trying to present to the entire room, but I felt I was becoming disconnected with the people in the middle who were actually participating. So about 20 minutes in, I made a statement that I'm going to turn the microphone off, and if anyone wants to participate, they can come into the center. Those on the outside can still observe, but you may not hear everything. But I want to give my attention to those who are actually participating. And I found a shift in change in my ability. It felt more natural, and it felt more engaging with the people who I was talking to. So that's a tip I'm newly coming to in terms of where does my focus need to be in a presentation like that. If people are choosing to sit and observe, that's fine, but I'm going to try to put my energy into the participants because I think that more naturally shows as well, even for those people on the outside, how I would facilitate with a group, where my attention is, rather than saying like, I'm talking, but really I care about the people over there. So that's something I'm going to continue to do. Tip number 4 is less is more, but plan for more. Because the scalability is hard, and because if you ever work with larger groups, they take longer, you never really know how long an activity is going to last. So you can do your best to plan for how much time you want to give to an activity, but you just don't know what the questions are going to be, what the conversation leads to. If it's with more people, typically it sometimes takes longer. And so I know I'm going to do less, but I will plan for more just in case. But this is a critical part in this. Less is more, plan for more, but never mention you had more. I can't re-emphasize that enough. Well, I can, I'll just say it again. Less is more, plan for more, but don't mention you had more. Because they don't know what was in your agenda. And when you say, oh, I wish I had more time because I had more activities, they will judge it as your poor time management and planning. So even though I know that I'm going to do less than I planned for, I just don't mention that I've got more. And that will give me a relaxation knowing that I can always stretch things if things cut off quick. But I try to also put all up front my best activities until I look at maybe if I've got 10 minutes, I will skip then to the last one because I typically like to bookend my last activity as a good one too. I'm going to misquote this, but people don't remember the middle. They typically remember the start, the opening activity and the end activity. Those tend to anchor themselves to the memory a little bit more. So try to bookend a great activity and a great activity. Then it goes really, really good still. And then the less ones are at the bottom if you need to. And then the last one's one of the best ones too. And that way I look at my watch. All right, 10 minutes left. I need to throw in that last activity. I just go to the end because I know that's how I conclude. And it also leads to my conclusion statements. So that way I can miss out some of that middle. But don't go through and then miss out on that last one and then kind of rush to try to get there. People read that, they know that. Number 5 is start on time and end 5 minutes before the end. So let's say your workshop starts at 9. Make sure you're starting at 9. Even if people are still walking through the door, just start at 9 because some people came, but your time is already ticking. So you want to make sure you're actually starting. And go in with what I refer to often as the golden activity. What is going to make you feel relaxed and works in your flow, and you can do without thinking, and then all the energy, all that anticipation, anxiety sort of diminishes once you start. You get like the murmurs of giggles and whatever works for you in terms of like, oh, this is working. But end 5 minutes before the end. So I always consider if I've got an hour workshop, I've really only got 55. I want to finish. I want to be sending people out at that time because there's often like 10, 15-minute walk times between workshops. I don't need to be affecting that. I also don't want to negatively impact the next presenter, but I want to give time for that 5 minutes to be able to talk about things like social media. If there's an eval that you have to fill in, I want to give that time so it doesn't feel rushed. Workshops should be about giving information and sharing stuff, but if you work for an organization or you had a podcast, you might want to mention those things. So make sure that you're mentioning them. I often talk about my end spiel is often about this workshop was only as good as the people that came to it. So thank you so much for bringing your energy. If you would like to connect with me more, you have more questions, you can find me at this. And if you want a free resource that is just helpful every Tuesday, then you can check out the podcast. Whatever your spiel is, but leave yourself time so you're not rushing that as people are about to leave. Like it stopped at 10 and then they've got to transition to the next one. You've got people coming in who are not a part of your workshop, and then you're trying to yell out, and you can find me on this, doesn't work and will make things harder for you. So there you go. 5 tips, just a reflection on my last workshop offering, which I actually presented yesterday. So it's really fresh, top of the dome. And yeah, sit and chat with attendees, choose activities that scale, focus on those that participate. Less is more, plan for more, but don't mention more. And start on time and end 5 minutes before the end. Okay. Hopefully that's helpful, especially if you've got conference season is in swing and you've got some workshops and you're presenting. If you want to reach out and just throw an idea at me in terms of like, this is our first time I'm presenting, I have this plan with this work, you want some feedback, you want me to read it, send me an email, podcast@highfiveadventure.org, or go to Instagram and send me a direct message. That's at Vertical Playpen. And I'm very happy to go through that, also jump on a call with you to discuss it and help you with your planning. I have presented over 100 times now at conferences, and there's still some level of anxiety, but I'm improving every moment. And then if you have questions, then you can always reach out and I'm sure to help. I'm saying that as if I'm not me. I'm sure I will help. No, I will help. So please reach out. Okay. Thanks, friends. And I will see you on the next one.